Welcome to Cranfield School of Management. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. My name is Toby Thompson. I'm the studio director here at the Cranfield's glorious Grenville Turner Studios. You'll see the name of that very shortly. Thanks again for taking the time. I know you've got busy days. If you're watching the recording, you missed an amazing session. This is going to be interactive. So those of you that are joining us live, please send us your questions, your comments, your observations at pretty much any time during this 1 hour that we're going to be together. You know Zoom. This is probably your third or fourth Zoom meeting of the day. In the Zoom text chat, type a question or observation, and we will do our level best. I will do my level best to pick that up and weave it into the conversation. We're here today in the next of the Future of Everything, very ambitious title, Future of Everything series, and we're looking at professional excellence. So if you're in the wrong meeting, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So any questions that you may have around professional excellence, the future of that, and we're going to come on to quite what that is, think of that question and type it into the text chat. Do us a favor though now, tell us where you are in the world. Those of you joining us live, tell us which country you're in, where you are, and we'll pick that up on the Zoom text chat. So thank you. And I've got some colleagues also in the background who are helping with that. I'm joined in the studio here today, and it gives me great pleasure to be joined by Professor Andrey Pavlov. Andrey and I have worked together, so Andrey, it's great to see you back in the studio there, so thank you. And we're also joined, and this is the fun part, the best part of my job, we're joined by two alumni who can tell us a bit more about how Cranfield is engaging, certainly on what we're going to hear about later on. There we go. Liz is on the left. Liz, give us a wave just to prove that you are real, and Bish is on the right. Bish is looking very yellow there in that wonderful yellow room. I think Bish is in Dubai. And Liz, you're in the UK. So this is going to be interactive. You can ask a ton of questions around professional excellence, and these guys may be able to answer some of those questions. I'm going to come to you first if I can though, Andrey. What is the future of professional excellence?
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, first of all, Toby, I just want to say that it's always good to be back in the studio. Always enjoying our conversations here.
Good.
And I also want to extend a very warm welcome to everyone in the audience. So welcome to Cranfield, or welcome back to Cranfield, whatever it might be for you. And back to your question, right? The future of professional excellence.
What is it?
See, I think professional excellence has come to mean now, currently, a mastery of a technical skill. And it could be a more technical skill, like, for example, executing an audit. It could be a less technical skill, a more kind of sophisticated skill, like, for example, being a strategy consultant or being an M&A specialist, mergers and acquisitions specialist. But it's about being a specialist. But now, I've been in this job for a long time. It's actually a bit of an anniversary for me.
Today?
This year, I would say.
Wow,
This is this year. So this year is exactly 20 years since I've taught my first MBA class. So I've been able to see quite a lot of people progress, through their careers. And what I've noticed over these 2 decades, right, what differentiates people who tend to shoot up and tend to take up the positions of real influence and real responsibility is that they're certainly specialists, but they're not just specialists. They're interested in quite a lot of other things around their professions. So for example, they're interested in the basic assumptions behind their profession. So for example, why are we doing things this way? Or why are we doing these things at all? Right? They're also interested in taking different perspectives on the same issue. Like, for example, I mentioned audit. So if you talk about audit, you can say it's a purely financial exercise, right? It's a health check, or it's a validity check on how somebody performed financial analysis. And that's fair enough. But you can also see audit as a social activity, as a way of building trust, as a way of building long-term relationships and long-term connections. And in fact, it's precisely this this view of audit that kind of precipitated the Enron crisis, if you remember, with Arthur Andersen and everything, where what we found out is that the audit function and the advisory function have become so entangled over time that they couldn't separate them. So audit can be, for example, also a social mechanism, right? A process of building a relationship. So kind of seeing things from different perspectives. And the third thing that these, I think these superstars, this professional superstars are interested in is how their profession fits within the overall social context, within the broader context. So for example, why do we actually need auditors, right? What's the social contribution of auditors? And I don't mean to pick on auditors, but why do we need bankers? Why do we need management researchers?
Yes,
it's an interesting question, right?
Yeah.
What's actually the social contribution of people like me, right? People who do research and teach, right? And I think so these three things, kind of the being interested in the assumptions, being interested in taking different perspectives, fundamentally different perspectives, and being interested in how your profession fits within the much broader context is what will differentiate professionals in the future. And I think we'll see more of this, kind of more reflective individuals and more of this deeper second order thinking. So for me, the future of professional excellence is this.
You said deeper second order thinking. That's kind of scary. If you're scared about that, I'm keen to pick that a little bit deeper. Are you talking about critical thinking? Are you talking about philosophy? What in particular are you talking about?
I knew you would mention philosophy. For those of you who don't know, for the benefit of people in the audience, Toby here is a professional philosopher with a PhD in philosophy of executive education. So of course he would mention philosophy. And I think it's true. Philosophy is certainly there, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And I think I'm talking about fundamental, deep thinking in general. And in fact, the way I came into this was not through philosophy, but through actually a management discipline. Should I give you a bit of background?
Please, please.
Okay, so I think it was 2009, so 14 years ago. I was asked to teach a class in organization theory. Now, organization theory, if you can imagine, I mean, it even sounds really theoretical, right? And it's a deeply theoretical discipline. It's about what organizations are and how they function, right? So it's kind of like, it almost on the surface, serious, and on the surface, it doesn't actually have any practical relevance. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay. And then I was told that actually the audience will be executive students, so people who come to Cranfield for a week at a time, but then they go straight back to their workplace, right? So they're practical people, practicing professionals, yeah, the practitioners, and the whole kind of spirit of this program is very, very practical. And I thought, oh my God. Right? How am I going to talk to practically inclined, practically minded people?
They're not going to be interested
about organization theory of all things, right? Yeah. But then I thought, hang on a second, that's a challenge, right? Because let's see how we can make this relevant, right? Let's see how we can make the insights of organization theory, of this kind of very deep discipline that challenges the assumptions behind what organizations are, and let's see if we can make it relevant to these people. And it turned out, but the course turned out to be a massive success. And I've taught it for many years. I've taught it to our executive audience, to our master's audience, to our executive doctorate, PhD students, everyone. And the way it worked, I think, for me, or what it showed me, is that what people really appreciated was that if you're willing to drop down a level, right, drop down a level from, let's say, the basic management 2x2s, right, the basic management frameworks, like 5 steps to turning a company around, or something like this. Just drop down a level and think about what's at play here. What are we really looking at? You suddenly begin to see many more ways of acting, many more ways of improving organizations, many more ways of intervening in an organization. Should I give you an example?
Please, please.
I'll give you 3 theories, right? And bear with me. I don't mean to turn this into a lecture, but I'll give you 3 theories. Feel free to stop me if you're getting bored.
I don't dare stop him, but please ask your questions before he gets on it. Ask your questions at any time. So we've got a whole ton of comments in the chat.
But I do mean it. Feel free to stop me. But basically, right. So everybody's got an implicit way of looking at an organization, an implicit view of what an organization is, and it's usually somewhat influenced by kind of the engineering view of the world, the machine view of the world, kind of input, process, output. So how do you improve performance? You manage that line, right? You manage the processes, you make them more efficient, you figure out what different people need to do, you give them instructions, control their work, and so you get performance, right? But that's not the only way to think about what an organization is, and therefore it's not the only way to think about how to improve performance. Right? So one of the organization theories, which is quite prevalent, I think, and has been quite prevalent for a long time, is agency theory. And again, I don't mean to turn this into lecture, but just to give you a flavor of it, right? So agency theory assumes that an organization is not just an input, process, output, but it's a nexus of contracts, right? If you look at an organization, you see contracts. And in a way, what you're doing by employing another theory is you're taking off your set of lenses, right? And you're putting on another set of lenses. And so if you were kind of looking at an organization and saying, well, okay, so how do I manage this input, process, output stuff? You put on the agency theory perspective, lenses, right? And suddenly, you see a nexus of contracts. So you see that the owners of the organizations hire the managers hire their subordinates, for example, and so on and so forth. So actually, this is just a network of contracts.
So the implication is that you can put on different lenses.
Exactly, and I'm coming to it in a second.
Yeah. Oh, just let you know, Steph, thank you, Steph. Steph wants to know books on organizational theory that you recommend.
Okay.
He'll come back to that later on.
Okay, sounds good. Right, so you put on the lens, lenses. you see an nexus of contract, a network of contracts, right? Where people contract with each other. So what's the issue there? The issue is that, as with any contracts, you have different parties who might have different incentives, right? So for example, the owner of the company might want to maximize the long-term value of the company, but the manager whom the owner has hired might want very different things, right? It's just the managers are just hired hands, and they might want different things. So for example, they want a personal jet, right? Or they want a great office, right? Lots of things. So what do you do then? And the answer becomes align incentives, right? And that's where we have solutions such as, for example, profit-sharing plans, right? So that's being the incentive. So everyone works together to increase the overall size of the pie, and then we'll split the pie. Right? Or things like, for example, stock options, right? Where executives are part of the executive compensation is just options, which are vested in over a long period of time, and then the executives are also incentivized to increase the value of the shares, right? Because their options are share options. Things like clawback provisions in the contracts, right? So if you leave, for example, without having finished the project, some of your compensation is literally clawed back, right? So that's the agency theory thinking, and that's how we think about improving performance. But again, that's not the only way of looking at it. And so
I was hoping you'd say that.
You take off the agency theory perspective,
and you put on some new ones.
And you put on.
How do you know what to put on? What glasses to put on?
You don't, because none of them will give you a full answer. But every perspective, every set of lenses will give you an interesting, partial view of the truth, right? And so you just, the more you know, the more you the more you can see, the more aspects and facets of the issue you can see. So, for example, another theory that's quite popular, quite powerful, is contingency theory, and that's the idea that an organization is open to its environment, right? And it's not just a black box, right? So you put on these lenses, and you see that, well, okay. Suddenly we see the organization that's open to the external environment and to the internal environment as well. And so what that means is that, well, if you want to improve performance, there is no single answer, right? It really depends on your environment, and it really depends on what you're trying to do. So let's say if you're running a steel mill, right? It's a continuous production cycle. Those furnaces can't be stopped. They run for months, years sometimes, right? And if that's how you produce your product, that affects everything else. That affects how you write procedures, that affects the kind of people you hire, that affects how you do strategy, how you talk to your customers, the kind of contracts you enter, and so on and so forth. As opposed to, let's say, an architecture bureau, and I have to be really careful here because we've got Bish on the line, who is an architect. But if you have an architecture bureau who's building, let's say, a landmark building, and it's a one-off, right? The task is to put together the right kinds of people, they build the building and then they're disbanded, right? They may be reconfigured in a different way for a different building because different building might have different requirements, right? And so again, the way you write processes and procedures, the way you compensate people, the type of people you have is different.
It's how you see the world. These are how you see the
world.
Well,
it's more than that. It's not just how you see the world. It's what the world requires of you.
Wow.
Right? So for example, again, if you're in a highly volatile, fast-paced environment, you don't have the option, you don't have the luxury of building long, thick books of plans and procedures, right? You just have to do things much more quickly. So you have heuristics, you have decision rules, you're thinking if then, right? And you try things quickly. But if you're in a relatively stable environment, you can actually afford to be efficient by investing a lot in expensive equipment, by thinking about the processes, really fine-tuning them, and then achieving efficiencies through volume. So it really depends on what environment you're in and what you're trying to do. Right? Similarly, it depends. Are you a big organization or small organizations? Because big organizations have to do things in a particular way. Are you local? Are you international? Right. So all of these are critical contingencies in the language of this theory. And therefore, if you want to improve performance, the answer is no longer aligning incentives, but the answer is you have to really try to understand what you're trying to do. And what's the environment like?
I want to say it depends with the contingency theory. It depends.
It depends. It's
great to be able to say that. It depends.
Yes, it's actually exactly what it's. If this theory could be summarized in a in a tagline, it will be: it depends.
Yeah.
A final example: institutional theory.
So we've had agency, contingency, institutional
theory, right?
Okay.
And if you think about agency theory and contingency theory, they're very economic, right? It's all about how you optimize the profit. It's thinking about the accounting and the profit. But institutional theory says, well, hang on a second. Well, organizations are actually embedded in the society, right? In the network of individuals, nations, cultures, and things like this. And so there are quite a lot of pressures that these organizations have to at least acknowledge, right? So some of those pressures might come from regulators. Some of those pressures might come from just the industry norms, the prevailing zeitgeist, so to speak.
Spirit of the times.
Spirit of the times, exactly. The kind of norms of the profession, for example, or the rules of the industry, right? And so actually, it's no longer then about being efficient. It's about making sure that this environment actually allows you to exist and to work. So it's about earning legitimacy, not just efficiency. Right? And again, it's a completely different way of thinking about how to improve performance then, because then your answer to how do I improve performance of my organization is, well, I have to understand what pressures am I under and what do I do with these pressures? Do I resist them? Do I try and negotiate them? Do I oppose them? Or do I actually try to rewrite them and reconfigure them, right? By lobbying, for example, some of the regulators and things like this. And I'm simplifying it, but you can see what I'm doing. You know, every time I'm putting on a new lens. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think it's very kind of.
Okay, can I ask a question on behalf of Alan? Alan,
Go
thank you
for
for your question. Alan is saying, why isn't it just a focus on excellence? Here we're talking about professional excellence. Why not just excellence? What's the special agency, institutional contingency? Why not just excellence?
Yeah, so the way I'm thinking about it is we're talking about thinking about business, right? And thinking about organizations. I'm taking the perspective of people who are in charge of these organizations, or at least notionally in charge of these organizations. And so, hence for me, that's the kind of the angle of professional excellence. But yeah, absolutely, it could be excellence. If you're taking the perspective of the organization itself, it could be much more general. But to just come back to this question, and once in class, I had a person, director of innovation for a big organization. I'm not going to name any organizations today, but director of innovation for a huge organization, membership-based, 40 million members, right? So that's more than the population of Canada, right? And she said to me, you know, after this organization theory class, she said to me, this has completely changed the way I see the world and my work. Wow. Right? And so that's the thing, because once you've been exposed to this, and once you've been exposed to this kind of thinking, where you thought you saw one solution to a problem, you suddenly see 4 or 6 or 8, right? And it's immensely empowering.
Wow. So you developed, or rather you found a hunger for this sort of question,
Absolutely.
this sort of questioning.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's what I mean. So when I walked into that classroom, I was thinking, how am I going to teach organization theory to, to finance directors, literally? But it turned out to be absolutely, absolutely groundbreaking.
Are you saying then everyone on the call here today needs to be a philosopher, or they just need to ask, or not be afraid to ask, critical questions and challenge assumptions?
Well, Toby, what's philosophy?
Whoa. I guess it's the love of wisdom. That's literally what it is. But for me, it's asking questions. So, and then understanding what your assumptions are.
Indeed.
So you seem to be doing that with organizational theory. You thought it was agency, actually it's contingency, or it's institutional, or it could be another one.
Yeah, and it's not that actually it is something. It's just you're taking different positions, you're assuming different perspectives, and you see things in different ways. And most importantly, you see different ways of improving performance, right? Of intervening, right? More courses of actions open up to you if you're willing to do this. And it does not have to be philosophy, but of course, philosophy is probably the most powerful way of doing this. And that's why after teaching organization theory for a while, I actually developed a course on philosophy here at Cranfield as well.
That's what I want to ask you about, because you've distilled all that learning into an elective on the MBA. We're going to be talking about ambition with Liz and Bish later on, but tell us, where did that start? It sounds like it started with that hunger that you identified.
Exactly. So I realized that there is a hunger, there's a thirst for good quality, deep thinking, and there is a realization and recognition of how empowering it could be, right? And then I thought, well, what can you find a better discipline than philosophy to do this? Right?
No is the answer to that.
Well, you would say that, wouldn't you? And so I thought, okay, so can we actually can we do real philosophy? Can we do it on the MBA? And so I developed that course, 2018. So that's 5 years now, yeah? 6 years, coming to the 6th year.
Safe in the knowledge that there was an appetite for it. At least.
Yes, that's the thing.
Yes.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have touched it. Yeah. I still didn't know whether the faculty would like it and whether the faculty would allow me to put a course on philosophy in a business school, right?
Something tells me they did.
Yeah. They did, yeah. And I didn't know whether the students would like it. Right?
Something tells me they like it.
Well, we'll ask Liz and Bish what they think about this.
Stick around to find out that question.
But yeah, I developed the concept for that course literally on a napkin at some point with a former colleague of ours, Professor Donna Latkin. She's now gone back to America,
yes,
but she was here. And essentially, we looked at the same principle, right? Can we look at an issue from different perspectives, but now not just from business and organization theory perspectives, but from fundamentally different perspectives. Would it be helpful if I
was saying, you got a thingy there. Please, can you draw it? Because I feel a 2x2 coming on.
Well, it's not quite a 2x2.
We're in a management school, so it has to be a 2x2, but
well,
go on.
Yeah. That's my line, Tom.
So this is the foundation of the elective, or the foundation of your thinking? Say more.
This is the structure of the elective.
Okay.
This is how we've structured it, and so my thinking behind it was that, well, let's see if we can come up with a structure that will enable people to see the persisting dilemmas of leadership. Mm-hmm, so it's a course in philosophy of leadership, right. From radically different perspective and fundamental perspectives. Right?
Okay. Hope you got good writing and good drawing.
Well, let's see. So what we did was we looked at it from two sets of opposites, right? We said one particular worldview is we could summarize it as objectivism, right?
Objectivism, how the world is.
How the world is, but most importantly, the fact that there is an objective answer to something, right? That there is a reality that's independent of us.
Independent of opinion.
Independent of opinion, independent of our thinking, actually, right? Okay. And we're just trying to get closer and closer and closer to it. I mean, science does that, and hopefully, in a good argument, that's what we are trying to do.
And some will say that's the real world.
Yeah, and someone will say that's it, that's real. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have
personal,
well, if we have objectivism, that would be
subjectivism,
exactly. You've done philosophy.
If you believe in objects and subjects, I don't actually, but there you go. More on that story later. I can read your writing. Very nice.
And that's a worldview that says that reality reveals to us, to everyone individually.
And maybe I create reality myself.
Yeah, and however you see the world that's the final answer, right? And actually we have to respect it, and there is no way for us to kind of to argue about this.
So these are legit. Objectivism and subjectivism, legit perspectives.
Yeah, legit perspectives. And you can see immediately how fundamental they are to how people perceive the world. And if you're thinking about business, you can immediately see, you can immediately think of conversations or conflicts or disagreements that you would have had with people who are sitting on the opposite ends of the spectrum, right? So some people want the truth, and some people say, no. Well, what kind of the truth are you talking about? And everything's relative to me, to the context, to the language, to the culture, to the country.
It depends.
It depends. Yeah, exactly. And then the other sort of set of opposites is how we engage with the world. How do we actually get at the truth? And one side of it is phenomenology.
This is going to scare a few people. Phenomenology, you got to explain that to us.
Yeah, it's a very complex school of thought. I can see that
It'll bear with us. The tech will go. It'll keep going. Phenomenology. So looking at the phenomena of the world, what you see.
Looking at the phenomena of the world.
What's available for us to see and perceive.
What's in front of your eyes, and how you are. There we go. It's back.
Yep.
And how you experience it. Right? Okay. And if you're if you're willing to really get into the experience of it, you might be actually to see the essence of the phenomenon. Right? There are different ways of interpreting it, but the point here is that you really want to try and experience something, really think about it, really kind of connect your conscious mind with it.
As opposed to, I'm thinking, what's coming up next?
Well, what's coming up next is something that's probably most familiar to everyone, is pragmatism, right?
If you've got any questions or queries about this, then please type them into the text chat at any time. Pragmatism.
Pragmatism, yeah. And that's a way of discovering the truth by acting, right? By actually, if we're talking about taglines here, right? So the tagline here would be, if you want to learn about something, go try and change it, right? So
don't learn about it, just go do something with it.
That's it.
Do it.
And you can see how that's the opposite of phenomenology, because phenomenology would be sit down and really think and really try to kind of get to the experience of it. Whereas pragmatism would say, well, no, just get on with it, get on with it, and just be willing to learn, right? And so this sort of, this builds the foundation for our discussion. And what we do then is we take 8 enduring leadership challenges, leadership dilemmas. So for example, loyalty, truth, money, power.
How are you choosing these?
Technology.
These just big. They're big and persistent.
Persistent.
Not just been around for a while.
But they've been around for a while, and we haven't been able to crack the answer, to crack them, right? So for example, we haven't been able to crack the answer to what loyalty means.
Wow.
And how and why you should be loyal to something, and whether you could be loyal to a person or to a collective entity like a country.
True.
And if you are, then can a country be loyal back to you? I mean, can an organization be loyal back to you? What does that actually mean? Yeah,
right? Yeah. See, I'm thinking, I got that thinking hat on now. Yeah. I'm liking it.
Yeah, exactly. And so we then look at, let's say, truth, and we use this as a system of coordinates, so to speak, to think about different perspectives on truth, but also what it means in a business context. So, for example, we can say, if we're talking about the truth here, right?
You say truth, like that's a massive thing.
Yeah, we do what we can. We do what we can. So, on the objectivism side, of course, there would be an idea that there is an objective truth, right? And we are trying to approach it, and we can talk about how we can try to approach it. On the subjectivism side, of course, the idea of the truth would be that truth is mine. Yeah, and in fact, you have heard the expression "speak your truth." Yes. Right. So that you can see that this is where it is. Right.
I see it. I'm with you. Hopefully, you're with Andrey on this one.
Yeah. So this has disappeared now. We'll come back to it. But actually, I don't need it anyway. So if we can come back to the
No, we got that. So there's 4: phenomenology, pragmatism, objectivism, subjectivism.
And subjectivism, right?
Hold that 2 by 2, as we call it here, in your head. It's pretty abstract for some people on the call today.
Yeah.
Still abstract.
No, that's fair enough. That's why we spend a bit of time kind of disentangling this before we delve into this. But then we talk about things like loyalty and truth and power, and we pick it apart. The idea here being that if you can train your mind to think about these big ideas from different perspectives and do it usefully, it's immensely empowering. It actually gives you quite a lot of ways of quite a lot of options for acting, right? And what we do here is for every session, we read 2 works of philosophy.
Just two,
and 1 business case.
Wow.
Right. So because this is not a course in philosophy, this is a course in how philosophy helps us as business leaders.
Which in itself is pragmatic, by the sound of it. Applicable, pragmatic, practical.
I'm going to hold my judgment here, right? Or at least I'm not going to allow myself to be.
But it's something Cranfield prides itself on, is the pragmatism, the practicality of what it is that we do here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. So that's the elective.
Wow, I want to find out, and I know who to ask, because we've got 2 students here to find out. I want to know how that goes, and hopefully you want to know how that works and what that feels like. If you've not had a chance to type a question in, please put something into the text chat. Like I mentioned before, we got Chris, we got Claire, and we got Kirsty in the background who are helping with the questions here, and I can see there's a whole ton of them here. So Alison, thank you very much for your question. We're going to come back to that. If I can bring up Liz and Bish, because I want to ask some questions, and Andrey is
well, indeed, I think they're better positioned to talk about this.
You're too modest. You're too modest. But Liz, can I come to you first? Because did that make sense? Did that 2 by 2 ring a bell in the elective?
Not at first, it didn't, but it does over time. You start to really get a sense of how you apply those different theories in different contexts. And actually, it's a really rewarding feeling when you do get that kind of light bulb moment and sort of you're able to start to connect the dots, which does happen.
So Liz, you're a strategic advisor in the NHS. Why did you choose this particular elective on Cranfield School of Management's MBA program?
Well, I didn't really have any expectations of it. In O Week, which is the first week as a student where you're kind of inaugurated into life as a MBA student, we were introduced to the philosophy module as one of our electives, and Andrey presented a few different really thought-provoking scenarios, which led the class to start arguing with each other. And so I was really interested in, I didn't have a particular expectation, but I was really excited about having my mind stretched and to be challenged and to be frustrated and all of those things. And so that's why I chose the subject.
Brilliant. And Bish, can I come to you? You had a choice, a bunch of other electives you could have chosen. Bish, why did you choose the philosophy elective?
Likewise, first of all, thank you for having me on the talk. So I'll be honest, I was planning to take corporate finance actually earlier, but then I was introduced to the lecture by Professor Andrey, and we were discussing a few questions like how in an autonomous car, in a particular situation, what would the car do in a particular way? So we were talking about dilemmas and dichotomies, and that is what intrigued me, because in my profession, at least with my experience, we have been dealing with a lot of these issues, not exactly those issues, but a lot of similar kind of issues. So it was really really interesting to explore the entire module actually, and I'm glad that I took that. One of the best ones I have had.
So Bish, back in the company, you're a senior architect at Jacobs. They could say, don't waste your time on philosophy, do some serious engineering or architecting. They presumably were okay with that, or you would convince them that it's a good thing to do?
Okay, fair enough. There are 2 ways of looking at it. First of all, architects are some ways, guided by philosophy. That's why we call design philosophy of anything. So essentially, people do understand it, fortunately. And if given a chance, I mean, I'm pretty sure most of the architects would love to take that module as well. That is coming from from my field of expertise.
That's good to hear. Liz, can I come back to you?
Yeah.
Was there a moment, because Andrey described it, where you take your glasses off and you put another one on? Did you think, my goodness, I never thought of it that way? Was that one of your moments?
It happened quite a lot, actually. I remember being in the class and almost crying once. One of our
What an endorsement! What an endorsement, Liz.
Steady on, Liz.
One of our pre-readings was about the concept of, so Andrey was just talking about, can you be loyal to a country? Can you be loyal to an organization? So one of the pre-readings was just about that. And then I absolutely just loved I loved the chapter so much, the reading. And then I started to read about the author and his background and perspectives and what would have influenced him in his kind of philosophical position. And that was one of the moments for me where it really had a kind of profound impact on me. And the other part was about this idea of objectivist and subjectivist truth, and where the whole idea of post-truth and my truth comes from, and how it manifests and what that means in terms of the world around me. So those were the two things I think really where I in fact there were three because the other one then was around, I work in healthcare, so there's obviously a lot of ethical considerations in healthcare, and so we then towards the end of the module started to talk about AI and where are the kind of ethical boundaries in AI, what kind of decisions should be made, and how do you draw that line as kind of machine intelligence becomes, accelerated. So I think those were the three really standout, challenging moments in the module where I really kind of felt, wow, this is what learning is really about. I feel so lucky to be in here.
Wow, that's amazing endorsement. Bish, was there likewise a similar experience, or did it leave you cold?
No, I would actually agree with Elizabeth. When she was, talking, I was just thinking about my time during the lecture as well. So this is how I would put it. So in the class, we had so much of discussion and people were coming from different backgrounds. We all read the same reading material and everyone had a different opinion on the same subject matter. And let's say I enjoy finance as well, to be honest, but I can read finance. But that kind of discussion itself is so rich. In a sense, in everyday life, we are dealing with people, we are negotiating, we are making decisions based on in everyone's own principled stance, if I put it that way. So it really helped us, unpack a lot of things. Maybe someone is coming from one particular standpoint, someone is very objective in his outlook, and the other person is more subjective. So it was a how to say yeah. So it was a very enriching experience in the sense that there were so many colors of different opinions within the same lecture. And one particular, I was amazed actually that one particular document or one particular piece of work could have so many different interpretations as well at the same time.
That's good. Liz, can I come to you? And I must admit, I did take the liberty of asking ChatGPT 3.5, the 3 version, a question, what to ask Andrey in today's session. And ChatGPT came up with the following question. This is really good, and it follows on, Liz, from your point. Can you provide examples of successful business leaders who have applied philosophical principles to achieve strategic success? Liz, thinking roughly about that, application in the NHS, can you even begin to think about that?
Yeah, I mean, my background is in the private healthcare sector. And so before starting my MBA, I worked for a big private hospital group. And prior to working in business transformation and change and strategy development, my background was in marketing. And actually, where we came to, we talked before about challenging perspectives and questioning the truth and underlying assumptions. What we were trying to do was to fundamentally shift our center of gravity as an organization towards one that was very much patient-centered. But when you think about the complexity of healthcare, there's so many different stakeholders. You've got the patient experience, you've got the consultant, the GP, insurers. There's lots and lots of kind of different versions of the truth. And so how do you, and not to mention all of the administrators and people that are working within the hospitals, how do you pull all of those experiences and perspectives in terms of what that patient experience should look and feel like for a whole organization and apply it in a way that is meaningful to everyone? And so I think by really understanding the fact that people have different experiences, different perspectives, they're coming from different places, it teaches you to constantly challenge those assumptions, and it really helps you to put a framework around the way that you're thinking. And I think that was the thing that I was missing before the module, was that kind of a bit of a sense of the framework and a rationale for why people come from different places and how they end up with different conclusions and perspectives.
Liz, that's amazing. And what you can't see here is a massive smile on Andrey's face, not surprisingly, to elicit that kind of response. Bish, one last question for you. Stick around, by the way, because there could be some Q&A later on. Bish, what are the dangers of doing this? Are there any dangers of being philosophical?
Yes, I mean, everything has a flip side, right? I mean, if you get too much into philosophy, you may end up questioning each and every decision that you make, probably. And in the real world, you have deadlines and timelines, and you have to take decisions. You have to take decisions based on what you have in front of you. So, yes, deep thinking and philosophy are quite important, and I think everyone should have careful analysis of before taking any decision. But at the end of the day, you have to decide, you have to take the decisions. That is also important. So a bit of a balance needs to be maintained there. Yeah.
Bish, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
No, carry on. Keep going.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Okay.
I was done with it.
Stick around because there's a ton of questions. So thank you for your questions on the text chat. Andrey, if I can come back to you. Looking outside and to the future, where would this go? What can you do with this? What are the plans for this?
I'm trying to develop it into a much bigger theme, right? So we have had this MBA module for a while. It's great, at least for me. But I think there's so much power in this, and it's not just kind of coming from me. I think there's so much thirst for this and so much hunger for this. And so we're doing different things. And here at Cranfield, I mean, I should probably mention your course. So you now teach philosophy as well to our faculty, actually. So not even to the students, but to our faculty, which I think is an amazing way of getting philosophy into, or getting, it's not just philosophy. I don't want to get attached to it, right? Yes. I don't want to get attached to the kind of this idea of philosophy. Just thinking, right? Good, deep, fundamental thinking. And in fact, yes, I mean, you even developed an artifact, as I would say, a deck of cards here, 60 cards with different philosophers. And so I understand you use it as a...
it's a game.
As a game, and you use it as a way of randomly picking an idea, right?
Yes.
So whatever minute it is, so it's now, whatever it is, 1443. So if we pick card 43,
card number 43,
whatever it is here, that allows us to talk about that particular perspective on an issue. Right?
Which is similar to what you were doing, is saying
Master Dogen.
Oh, Dogen.
Zen.
Okay.
Zen Buddhism.
Very good. Very appropriate.
Good. So yeah, that's exactly kind of, I think it's the same way, and I'm so glad that you're doing this as well. And then, of course, our colleague Enes Unal, Dr. Enes Unal, who is in another part of the university. He's teaching a module on circular economy, and he's using this kind of thinking, philosophy, kind of second-order deep thinking to lead people through thinking about sustainability and the challenges of sustainability. So that's kind of how it's developing. And then, of course, again, coming back to you, you've been involved in one of the projects that I've sort of kind of initiated, where we actually reach out to people who have led the conversation about the interface between philosophy and practical professions. And so we interview them. So we have a series of interviews on philosophy for practical professions. And I'll ask the crew behind the set to show us the slide for this.
So if you type into Google Cranfield and philosophy, you'll come to this page. It's split in two in this case.
Indeed. I didn't mean it this way, but actually if you type in Cranfield philosophy, you'll come to this page, which is the page that we've set up. And this is where Toby and I interview people who have really thought deeply about this, the connection, the interface, and the power of good thinking for practical professions. And so on the left-hand side, you can see the actual page, and on the right-hand side, you can get all of those videos on YouTube as well. And in fact, I believe our studio has a clip of kind of connections of clips from those interviews. Can we see them if possible?
So this is a compilation of the types of things that are talked about.
Yeah, just to give everyone in the audience a feel for what it is.
So talk us through what it is
like.
that we're seeing here.
Yeah, so this is how it usually starts, and you and I are here, a slightly different setup, slightly different background, and we invite people from different perspective, from different professions who have thought about this in different ways. So this is, for example, Joe Badaracco. He's the inspiration behind my course. He's at Harvard Business School. Paul is a real philosopher. Guru, whom you've just seen, is actually a leading scientist at the National Academy of Engineering in the US, because we are quite interested in the philosophy of engineering as well, any practical profession, right? This is a corporate philosopher, Luc Brabander, who used to be a partner at BCG, and believe it or not, was a partner doing philosophy in corporations. Emma Swin, you see here, she leads a charity applying philosophy, actually teaching philosophy to children in schools across the UK. So we have a combination of professional philosophers, I suppose, business leaders in the third sector, who are all doing this, right? Doing what we are trying to do here.
So are we alone? Is Cranfield alone in doing this?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's actually, I think there's been an explosion of interest in philosophy in general, and in bringing this kind of deep, critical, second-order, double loop thinking into business schools. I actually have another slide here for you. So I mean, I've pulled a couple of things that, but at least things that I've engaged with. I mean, you can see that there are lots of universities that do this. So there's a course in Harvard called The Moral Leader. There's a new program at Montclair State University in the US where you can get, in 5 years, you can get an MBA in philosophy and management. Right? So you earn your bachelor's, and then you earn your MBA, and it's actually philosophy and management. It's a fantastic new program. Philosophy for children is really big, and there are lots of organizations, lots of charities. They tend to be charities. So Sapere, the Philosophy Foundation, they are really active in bringing philosophy to the classrooms in schools.
Sapere Aude, Immanuel Kant, Dare to Know.
Dare to Know, exactly. And so sometimes to children as young as 7 or 8. Right?
Amazing.
There's a whole new movement, I suppose, that's called philosophical counseling, right? So instead of calling your therapist, you call a philosopher. If your question is not necessarily a psychological question, but if you're dealing with a dilemma, if you're dealing with if you actually need help in thinking through different ways of framing something, you call a philosopher, right? And there's a big, probably the biggest organization there is the American Philosophical Practitioners Association. But there's also other stuff, much more accessible, like podcasts, for example. And I've put here a few podcasts that I like, and they give you various angles, various ways of thinking about philosophy and about, I suppose, different perspectives on life and question and issues that every one of us in life comes across. There's been an explosion, as you probably know, the explosion of interest in Stoicism,
yes.
Right? In the philosophy of Stoicism. This is sort of late Roman Empire. And they even hold their own conference, which is called the Stoicon. Right? And of course, philosophy has made its inroads into business. So you have people like corporate philosophers, like Luke, whom we interviewed. And some organizations actually have have chief philosophy officers, right?
Wow.
People with that kind of title, the CPO.
Amazing.
So we are certainly not alone in this.
I want to come to the Q&A because you've got a ton of questions. If you've not had a chance to type in a question into the text chat in Zoom, please go ahead and do that one. Mark has a question, Mark Denton. Applying institutional theory, if your organization is a relatively new market entrant, would it be appropriate to say that it will be very difficult to achieve competitive advantage adopting industry norms as best practice?
Well, indeed, right. So we're going back to kind of thinking about business here. Yes, indeed. If you're a new entrant in an industry, or the institutionalists wouldn't talk about industries, they would talk about an institutional field, like healthcare, for example, the institutional field, or education as an institutional field. And if you're a new entrant, it will be very, very difficult for you to get a leading position, and it's not impossible. But it takes time, because one of the things you have to do is you have to actually find out what those unspoken rules of business and norms of the profession are, right? And as you're learning them, you're becoming more and more empowered. And it's really interesting that is it Mark?
Mark,
the
yes.
question. It's really interesting, Mark. You asked this question. I've just had a PhD student who's completed his PhD, and he's looked at exactly that question, right? So how can you be an institutional entrepreneur, right? And he looked at a small charity who entered global healthcare, trying to improve child immunization in resource-poor countries. Right? And what he found is exactly that. It takes a bit of time, it takes a lot of learning, and you have to engage with all of the big players in the institution. You have to understand the rules of the game and how the unspoken rules of the game, how things happen. And over time, you actually become embedded in that institution, become part of that institution. So difficult, yes. Possible, also yes. Takes time.
Mark, nice one.
And that would be, just to come back to, that would be the institutional theory answer to this, right? If you'd pick a different type of lens, different kind of lens, it wouldn't even look at the norms of the field, right? It would say, well, no, it's all about the economic analysis of it. And if you can find an economically attractive niche, you'll be successful.
Mark, you're a philosopher. One from Steph. Steph is saying, I feel that the human body is incapable of reaching objective truth. That's why we work in teams, to gather every perspective of the object. Of course, that cannot be absolute, but nearing the absolute. So there's no such thing as objective truth.
Very good. So what Steph is hinting at, I think, to use a specialist term, is intersubjectivity.
Ooh, Steph.
Right. So we're not so subjectively. Everyone has a particular way of seeing the world. But if we work in teams, and if we are willing to engage in a conversation, we arrive at some sort of a common picture, right? And that's sometimes the best we can do, right? So it's not quite objectivity, but it's intersubjectivity. So it's many subjects together, right? But it's still a very, I would say it still has an objectivist flavor, right? So because I think, Steph, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying actually is, well, we still want to get to the truth. It's just we can't do it. We are incapable of doing it on our own, so we need to come together, right? But there's still this kind of pull towards, well, the right solution, and you may not arrive at it individually, but you arrive at it collectively. And of course, the true subjectivists would disagree with you, Steph, and they would say, well, that's a wrong enterprise anyway. Why would we want to do it? Everyone's got access to his or her truth.
How do I know you're telling the truth? Don't answer that. Uday has a question. In what ways can organizations foster a culture of deep thinking or encourage autonomy amongst their employees to enhance productivity, creativity, and I'm going to add, Uday, innovation?
A really good question. I've thought about it for a long time. I wonder what Liz and Bish think about it, because they are out there doing this with
Liz and Bish. Let's put that one to you. This is from Uday.
But let me try.
Hold those thoughts.
I'm not going to duck out of any questions, Toby, here.
Okay.
So I'm going to at least attempt it. In my view, it starts with one or two people who are philosophically inclined, right? So it starts with
Let's call them Liz or Bish.
Could be Liz or Bish, right? It starts with it doesn't necessarily need to be a leader. It helps if it is a leader, but someone who is willing to ask those questions, and someone who's got a bit of the inquisitive perspective on the world. And if somebody's asking those questions, that's how that culture takes hold. But if there's no one who is interested in philosophy in your organization, you won't get it there.
Liz, can you add to that, please?
Well, as a marketeer, I'd probably also add, it depends on how you position it.
It depends.
And I think if you possibly say, I want us to really think deeply and philosophically, I'm not sure even I would have had a fantastic response to that. I'm not sure I would have even really understood what we were trying to do. I think it's if we're just questioning assumptions, that's really where the change program that I was working on in my previous organization was where it all really started, gravitating around a shared sense of we want to do the right thing for the patient, but not really having a clear sense of how we do that. And so it did start with understanding everyone's intersubjective truths, but also about through the process of doing that, we identified so much duplication, over processing, gaps in the journey, all sorts of things that resulted in identifying innovations, new ways of working, new products that we could develop to patient. And so I think I agree with what Andrey is saying in terms of there has to be someone, there has to be a starting point somewhere, and then it's about how you communicate it in the way that the language will understand, so that they can get behind it and feel supportive of what you're trying to do.
Brilliant. Liz, I'm going to have to stop you there. Sorry, Bish, can I come to you? How do you and can you foster a culture of deeper thinking inside of your organization?
I mean, okay, I'll put it this way. What I felt is most people around you, they have some kind of a principled stance or a philosophical stance, and they are quite interested in that. When you talk to them, they may not have the right frameworks or the right terminology, but in a way they are thinking about things in a particular way. I'll give you a recent example. Actually, it's quite uncanny. So in one of the projects, you see, it's a complex environment, right? And when we are looking at like Andrey mentioned a little while ago, that it's not always the straight line where a project finishes from one point to the other end. It's not very objectivity, control, and predictability. That is what you, I think, wrote in Rethinking Organizational Performance.
Yep.
It's very complex, right? So I was reading about it, and I was having a conversation with some of my colleagues, and then I circulated your paper on that. I'm sorry about it, because I wanted to explain how complex environment works, and although we have programs which are very rigid in structure, how we can leverage or embrace complexities, volatility, those terms.
Thank you.
Bish, thank you so much. You've gotten a lot from that elective, and we want to see more of that. Bish and Liz, thank you very much indeed. We are coming to the end. I'm going to put one last question from my friend ChatGPT, who's asked this question, and I'm going to ask it on behalf of ChatGPT. And this was question 18 that I asked it. I asked for 20 questions. What advice would you give, Andrey, to business leaders who are looking to develop their philosophical and critical thinking skills? Bracket, that's not a bad question from ChatGPT.
It's not a bad question from ChatGPT. I would say try it. Do it.
Do it.
Do it. Philosophy, I think, to me, is, if you read about it, it's another boring discipline. Maybe not boring, but it's another discipline. Do it, right? Think about something deeply. So, for example, pick an issue you're dealing with now, and read some of the philosophical work about it, and see how it resonates. See what it makes you think about. For example, if we're talking about anxiety and stress, pick up the Stoics. And see how the Stoics actually think about fear, anxiety, and stress.
Give it a go.
Yeah, give it a go.
Your contact details are on the screen any second now, so please take a moment to scan this QR code, and you'll find out more.
Feel free to connect, absolutely.
Yes, feel free to connect to Andrey. Well, obviously, we're very keen to see you on the Cranfield School of Management MBA program. It goes without saying. This is a series, as you can tell, Future of Everything series. This is the next event. We are coming up sometime, probably January. So please stay in touch with Cranfield. We want to hear from you. If we can put that screen up on the back screen there, we want you to stay with us and find out a little bit more about what we think the future of everything is. I'm going to thank Liz and Bish. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and spending time out of your busy days. Andrey, thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you,
It's been
Toby.
fantastic. Give us a quick wave, Liz and Bish.
And thank you,
wave.
Liz and Bish, for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed. And please stay in touch for that event, which we think will be sometime in January. Scan that QR code. Please register your interest. The studio producers today were Marco Gomez and Robert Hackett. The producer was Chris Sordella and David Metcalf. My name is Toby Thompson. Thank you for watching.